Hi, I'm Finley. I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I'm currently living in Carnation, Washington, and beautiful Snoqualmie Valley, working at a farm here on the river. And I just started there earlier this fall, about the same time I started the MESA course. Started working here because I am trying to farm in the future and wanted some hands-on experience, and I had some educational experience, and this farm in particular is a sort of an educational nonprofit as well as being a production farm. So I'm shoot in there pretty well. And at the same time, I wanted a little more introduction to sort of the theoretical or conceptual basis for sustainable farming. In my explorations with food so far, I've come across a lot of terms and ideas like permaculture or biodynamic or biointensive, etc. And agroecology seemed like very sort of objective, all-inclusive study of sustainable agriculture. I am a fellow in MESA's Training and Applied Agroecology program, TAAP. And this presentation is about social environmental resiliency. So breaking it down, resilience is the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, or its elasticity. Or you could think of it as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. So it's good to distinguish resilience from durability. So not something that resists impact, but something that can absorb impact and not be affected by it. And as it applies to social ecological systems, we like to think about, or in the past perhaps, humans as separate from nature, existing in a social world, and then there's this other ecological world that they're sort of both systems happening alongside each other, where nature is more of an externality to our society. But in reality, they're far more interconnected. In fact, humans are a part of all living things in the biosphere and are dependent on other cycles on Earth, like the geosphere, and really nature is a precondition for our functioning as a society. So for that reason, we use the dash between social and ecological systems to show that they are linked. So if we apply the idea of resilience to that linked social ecological system, we get this definition. Social ecological resilience is the capacity to adapt or transform in the face of change in social ecological systems, particularly unexpected change in ways that continue to support human well-being. I like ending on that note of human well-being. It's social ecological resilience is the ability for us to continue being well and continue to change with the change that's undoubtedly going to come. So really what that means for us to be resilient in our societies and our ecologies, our ecosystems, is to become stewards of our biosphere. And there's many ways of doing that. But when resiliency increases in this social ecological system, the system can tolerate more disturbance. So things happen, impacts come, but we're able to keep going or bounce back from them. And it also gives us an opportunity to anticipate change, to be able to have some foresight and prepare ourselves for the future. When resiliency decreases, however, in that system, we become more vulnerable and we might feel the impacts of changes more deeply. And reversal of damages becomes more difficult or more expensive or any of those things. So there's 7 principles that have been highlighted in some studies about how we can go about creating a resilient social ecological system. And really it can be built in many ways, but it also can be eroded if lacking in some of these other ways. So it's important to look at each of these sort of 7 principles that have been highlighted to be able to build a very robust, redundant, resilient system. So as it applies to agroecology, we can expect that in any society or in any ecosystem, there's going to be disturbance. And in agricultural ecosystems, those disturbances might look like a drought or a flood. And agroecology's response to those might be using swale or contour farming to slow runoff, retain that water, and reduce erosion. Or in times of drought, store more groundwater to be able to provide water through the ground. And in that way, you have a more resilient ecosystem that's able to provide you. That disturbance might also look like pests or diseases. And in agroecology, we support the idea of diversification in all ways, and diversified crops promote self-regulation against pest outbreaks, and it can also lessen the impact of a failure if there is major damage to one particular crop. So that's just one example. And then, because this is a social ecological system, there might be social disturbances too. And one of those might be commodity volatility. So if the market goes up or down, it puts farmers at risk. However, farmers that are trying to practice agroecology have fewer ag inputs, less fuel, fertilizer, etc. And diversification reduces our dependency both on inputs and our reliance on selling a single cash crop. So if we diversify the crops that we're selling, so we can get multiple kinds of income, but it also means that we're not at the whim of the market. So in summary, agroecology provides us a method of farming that acknowledges that we both live in societies and in ecosystems, and that for us to continue to live well with each other and with nature, that we need to build resiliency. And luckily, agroecological practices give us many ways of building resilience so that we can continue to do so and adapt to change in the future and still thrive. Here are some references of those studies that I mentioned and some other further reading to check out. If you'd like to ask me some questions about this or anything else, this is the farm that I mentioned earlier where I work currently, and that's my email. You can get in touch with me.